Hello, and welcome again to another episode of Battle Ready. Ready. Where today we thought, over the holidays, we saw a lot of friends, a lot of family, right? And not all of them play Warhammer.
No.
So it came up several times. How do you talk to your friends? How do you talk to your family about Warhammer without sounding like a big goober nerd? And
even though those are the best kinds of people.
Well, okay, so that I think is the first tip that I think of when I thought of this topic.
We're the best.
The first tip is don't even try. Embrace it.
Yes.
Right? I think what makes somebody a nerd is that they're really excited about something unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's wargaming with little plastic army men, or they get really into cars and their big gearheads, or they get really into
model
golf,
airplanes.
or model airplanes, or ham radio, or any of a number of different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're geeking out about it and you think it's super cool, then you're a model airplane nerd, right?
Nerd.
So at some point, I think
we're the best.
Just embrace your Warhammer nerdery. Sometimes that enthusiasm is infectious,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you tell people, hey, I mean, you play with these toys, it's whatever.
Nurgle powers.
Then they're
Nurgle powers.
But if you make it sound lame, then people are going to say, let's use a little bit of ableist language, I guess. But if you make it sound boring, then people are going to just accept that it's boring and move on. And that, we don't want that, right?
No.
We want people to see our excitement and, like Nurgle, get infected by that excitement. If they see that you're having a good time.
The great gifts.
Exactly. If they see that you're having a good time, they might think, oh, well, they're certainly pretty jazzed about it. Maybe I should
try it.
Yeah, I should take a look into that, right? Or at least, even if they have no interest in it, at least they think, oh, well, it's something that they like. So it must be positive in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, is number one.
Although there's no bunnies and rainbows in Warhammer.
Oh, we could kit bash them. Kit bash them. These bunnies might look a lot like nerdlings, but they're bunnies. All right, so then I guess the question is, okay, what if you're with somebody and maybe you're on a date and you don't want to tell the girl and scare her off? You're like, actually, let me tell you about Warhammer. Well, let me tell you about the Horus Heresy. Oh, well, let me tell you about the Emperor of Man. And then she's gone before you even start talking about it, right? So what do you do to describe your hobby to people that doesn't make you sound like a big goober nerd?
You push these big plastic toys around and you shoot things and fight with dice.
Well, I think that's actually not bad. I think one of the things that you do...
Oversimplify.
Well, not just oversimplify, but you let them know that it's not serious,
mm-hmm.
right? Because if you go in there and be like, oh, it's the coolest thing, Aegis Sigmar. Yeah, if you start screaming wah and stuff, they're going to look at you like you are a crazy person. But if you sort of reduce it down so that you let them know, hey, I know I'm just pushing little plastic toys around, right?
But they're more than plastic toys to me.
Right, exactly. But you start there. You start with, it's this game. You take your little toy soldier men, you fight the other toy soldier men.
But they're cool.
But instead of it being like Napoleon at Waterloo, it's like dragons and magic. And it's really fun.
Lizard men riding dinosaurs.
It's lizard men riding dinosaurs.
It's the best.
And I think that is going to help people look at that and say, oh, okay, I get it. You're not like weird about it. You understand that it's toys. And you understand that what you're doing isn't a serious endeavor. It's a game. And so you're having fun with it. And I think that can help to avoid some of the gooberosity that might otherwise attend if you were to go deep into Warhammer. What else can you do?
I feel like now that there's Spearhead, you can invite them to play a game of Spearhead if they express interest.
That's true. I think that is a good point to getting anybody who's halfway interested and you're like, oh, maybe I want to explore this again. I think you're absolutely right. Spearhead is a great jumping on point. But I think we want to talk about one step before that. They don't even know what Warhammer is. They're just getting to know you. There's some friend, some family member who's like, hey, what are you up to these days?
Warhammer.
And then and they're like, what's that? And now how do you describe it? They're not going to play Spearhead. They're not there. You just want to explain to them, they've never heard of Warhammer before, explain to them what it is without also sounding
like an insane person.
Like a crazy man.
Well, it's this game where you push these plastic toys around, you roll dice and make them fight.
Right. Well, that was one. We talked about that, right, where you sort of, You dumb it down. Oh, I don't know about dumb it down, but you acknowledge the play aspect of it, right? What else? Well, another thing you could do is you could focus on the hobby aspect, right?
Ooh.
So you say, oh, it's this cool thing where you get to build these models, and you can, like, a lot of them are customizable, but instead of models of airplanes or tanks or whatever, you're building models of like warriors or magicians
fighting dinosaurs
or big orcs. And I think a lot of people will look at that, and then you say, oh, and then once you build them, it's cool because you don't just keep them on your shelf or whatever. There's a game you can play with them, and that game's really fun. And a lot of people know modeling, right? Because even like your old uncle, right, who's aged, he used to build model airplanes when he was young, right? So he'd be like, oh, okay, I get that. It's it's not model airplanes, the cool thing I did when I was young, but it's model. Okay, I can see where you are, and that way there's not as much gooberosity, right? Mm-hmm. You're finding a way to relate it, and I think that works for a lot of things too. Like maybe you know these friends because we all have multiple hobbies, right? We like Warhammer, right? But we also enjoy other things, and we have friends from other places that aren't Warhammer friends. And when we talk to them, like we might say, oh, maybe we've got a friend that we know is big into movies, big movie buff, right? Sees every movie that ever was. We might tell him, oh, yeah, it's this game, Warhammer. It's sort of like, the Lord of the Rings series, or Dragonheart, or pick a a fantasy movie.
Family movie.
And Dragonheart sort of is.
I don't know what the movie is.
A fantasy movie, and you say, yeah, it's like that where you get to pretend, or you get to have an army that fights the other army, and there's good guys and bad guys, and
except everyone's kind of.
Well, you don't need to get into that. You don't need to get right. You don't start there. You don't start with "Let me tell you the tale of grim dark." You don't start there, right? That's a little later when you wanna, because that's where that takes us.
Gooberosity.
Goobertown.
Yes.
Goobertown population U. So you talk about those sorts of things. You sort of relate it back, and they're like, "Hey, I like movies. I like fantasy movies. I could see a game about a fantasy movie. That sounds sort of cool." So that way you're like touching on their hobbies, though it makes them a goober. And then they're like, we are fellow goobers.
Yes.
Right? Rather than them saying, oh, what I do is normal and what you do, weird. That's weird. What else would we do? What else do you think?
Just show them the cool toys.
Oh, that I think is a good idea. I hadn't thought of that.
Cool toys are fun.
So sometimes you might, maybe you've mentioned Warhammer in the past or whatever, but they come over to help fix your car. All right. It's something totally not Warhammer related, right? They come over because you're going to go play golf later, right? But while they're at your house, you're like, oh, hey, check this out. I just finished painting, or I just finished building this thing, or I just, whatever. And then you show them your mega boss on Maw Crusher. You show them the Nagash that you have finally painted, and then they'll look at it and go, that is so neat. That is so neat. So I have a friend, actually, very good friend of mine, not remotely in the hobby, not even a little bit, has never built a model of any kind, has never painted models of any kind. He just does other things. He's an artistic guy, but that's just not what he does.
Okay, I was about to ask, has he painted? Period.
Maybe. He does film. He's a filmmaker. But anyway, so he would come over and we would be doing other things. And then I would be like, oh, hey, check out this model I just finished. And over time, as I showed him a couple from time to time, right, not all at once, didn't want to scare him.
The gooberation.
No, not. Yeah, I don't want to show although he would see all the boxes of armies. So he knew. But I would show him. And then one day he comes to me and he's like, I'm really interested in painting some of those miniatures. I don't know if I want to build any, but painting the miniatures sounds really cool. And I just happened to have built the Chaos Chariot, right? And you can build it as a horse chariot or a gore beast chariot.
Big human on sticks.
It's not a big human. And I built it as the chariot. And so I had an extra gore beast lying around.
Friend. And
I'm like, hey, I gave it to him. I was like, if you want to paint something, this is a fantasy thing. It sort of looks like a ape man creature. It's pretty big and imposing.
Hugs.
And so I said, hey, here you go. And I gave him some tips. I don't know if he ever actually painted it, but he was real excited. He asked me to paint something. I had something he could paint. So I'll have to follow up with him and see if he ever did anything with it. But that's another way where you find something that they like and you're like, here's your small introduction, and now you too have started to come to Goober City. Right?
It's like converting them to the dark side.
and a little bit it is.
It's the third side of the Force.
You're tempting them along, right? You're like, wow, it's just this fun hobby. And then when they express a little bit more interest, you're like, well, it has this cool backstory. A little bit more interest, ooh, look at these cool models. A little bit more interested, oh, here's this Spearhead game. And before you know it, there are thousands of dollars in debt because of various armies. Yeah. So, but I mean, ultimately, I think that the thing is, there's ways to do it. Right? And I think, especially with somebody who is not in nerd culture at all, right? If there's already a little bit of nerdery, if they're already into board games, they're already into Magic or Pokemon or whatever.
You can work with that.
Yeah. You're like, okay, you're in the zone. We just need to move you over onto this area of it.
The better spheres.
The better spheres. But if you're dealing with somebody who's just not in nerd culture at all, then I think you have to take it slow and you have to let them know, hey, this is a thing that I think is fun. Here's maybe a quick reason or two why I think it's fun. And then you just sort of, you let it go. You back it off, right? Somebody who doesn't know, you're like, oh yeah, we play with these little plastic army men, except they're wizards and dragons, and I get to play with my son, and it's super fun.
And vice versa.
And then there.
Me.
Yes. And then you let that sit. And then depending on what where it goes from there. They might say, oh, cool, and everything moves on, and you never talk about it again.
Yeah.
That's fine. But maybe the next time, maybe it moves on, but the next time you see him, they're like, oh, I have a cousin who plays Warhammer. Can you tell me more about it? And you go, why, yes, I can.
Also, cousin who plays Warhammer?
Yeah.
We're already farther along there.
Even then, though, you gotta like, you take the next few steps in, but you gotta gauge the reaction. If you start saying, oh, by the way, there's this 63 book series, whatever it is, and let me tell you how it works, you're gonna lose them, right? They're gonna be like, oh, I should not have asked. I'm never gonna ask again. I'm never making this mistake again, right? You gotta see where you are to avoid the stigma of being placed in Gooberville.
Even though it's the best.
It is, yeah, but you gotta walk them in. You can't just push them into the pool. They gotta go from step to step to step until they're comfortable.
Okay.
Don't push. I can see you already hoping to push. But anyway, I think in doing that, it's like I said, the best thing to do is just embrace the nerdery, live your best self, enjoy what you enjoy, and don't let anybody put you down for liking what you like.
Yeah.
But maybe you're talking to a boss, there's a promotion on the line, you feel like, ooh, maybe right now is not the best time to be my complete self. Maybe right now I should be a professional. And you just want to talk about it in a setting that's not not going to have any ill consequences, then I think some of those things that we discussed is probably
when you see them on the street.
Yeah, or you're talking in a work environment, you're talking on an early, first, second date, you're talking about, some new friend you just met at a party, and you're like, ooh, I gotta sort of feel this person out, see what kind of person they are. How dark can my humor be before I've offended them, right? You're in that sort of situation. Then yeah, I think these are ways that you can describe Warhammer and tell people what it is without, you're not downplaying it, you're not lying about it, but at the same time, you're also not scaring anybody away, right? So you get sort of the best of both worlds, and then depending on where it goes from there, maybe that, like I said, they never talk about it again, fine, or slowly but surely,
reel them in.
You reel them in. You got a new gaming partner. Invite them over to game night. Wish that GW had a 3-player game of this stuff. Oh my gosh. But until then, any final thoughts?
I think we covered all the gooberness we can.
All the gooberosity has been covered. All right, well, let us know in the comments below, what do you think? How do you talk about the hobby? Are you just 100% embracing all the time? Or do you have tips and tricks to sort of talk about it in a way that maybe doesn't cause too much in the way of terrible shame?
I feel no shame.
And you shouldn't. All right, this has been another episode of Battle Ready.
Yay!
Thanks so much for watching.